again? Will we be shot for the color of our skin again? But a fight for justice forced us out to fill the empty streets. Black Americans are still being killed for being black in America. The pandemic hitting Black, Indigenous, and people of color disproportionately has only worsened the epidemic of gun violence in those same communities. Because it's clear the fight for racial justice is still on, and we won't live without it. In Colorado, he stood against hatred, but in Wisconsin, he carried a Confederate flag. In Arizona, she stood for her patients, but in Michigan, she carried a swastika. They bought guns in record numbers, but we took it to the streets. So when we leave our homes this time, will the people carrying weapons of war and banners of hatred decide our future again? Or will we stand up and demonstrate our power? Our power means we demand all gun sales will be licensed. Our power means we demand weapons of war be banned for good. Our power means lawmakers must listen. Our power means we refuse to watch black people be murdered in the streets. Our power means we refuse to fear for our lives. We refuse to live without justice. It's our power, and we will use it.
Hi, my name is Cadence Nichols, and I'm one of the Colorado Co-State Directors.
And my name is Natalie Wadwa, and I'm the other Colorado Co-State Director.
March for Our Lives Colorado recognizes the impact of police brutality and what it does to our communities and our right to feel safe in our homes. We recognize that the means for change are hard, but we are ready to sit down and fight for our lives. As youth who cannot vote, it is the first step of our fight to bring those who can vote to realize the power that they have and their impact. Registering and voting is a tool that we often overlook, but its impact cannot be downplayed going into this crucial election, both on a national level and a state level.
Now we are excited to introduce Representative Jason Crow to give some welcoming remarks. Congressman Crow has been an ally in the gun violence prevention community. He has been fighting for common sense gun safety measures, including universal background checks and an assault rifle ban. In Congress, Representative Crow serves as vice chair of Gun Violence Prevention Task Force to help pass meaningful reforms. So we have been working in gun violence prevention for a long time. I personally started working in gun violence prevention 9 years ago after Sandy Hook. I had cousins who actually went to Sandy Hook Elementary. It's been a long 9 years. I've seen it all. And then when Parkland hit, I knew it was for me to really step up. That's when I became involved with March for Our Lives National, starting doing social media, and I've worked my way up to be state director, which is my position I hold today.
Similar to Natalie, I have also been in gun violence prevention for a very long time, since a very young age. I first got involved in March for Our Lives when I was in the 7th grade. This was after Parkland. I was in my 7th grade year, and my school participated in the walkouts, and I personally did attend the marches. The following year, a childhood friend of mine was shot and killed for no reason other than a mentally ill individual's right to own a firearm. So that was my call to action. That is when I really went head first into gun violence prevention, and that I've been working ever since.
Great. So we're actually going to transition now into a panel with our very own Caitlin Hunter. She's on our board in Colorado. She's our policy director, and she's going to be moderating this board with a few of our partner organizations in Colorado, and we're really excited to get this panel on the road. So Caitlin, off to you.
Hi, as Natalie just said, my name is Caitlin. I am the Legal and Policy Director, co-director for March for Our Lives Colorado. I personally was affected by a school shooting when I was a junior in high school. So that has kind of been my call to action revolving around gun violence prevention. Of course, that was a major point in my life. So I'm really glad to be doing what I'm doing. Today, we have, I believe, 2 panelists that will be answering some questions about systemic racism and police brutality. Teresa, would you like to introduce yourself? Teresa, are you on mute still?
So sorry. My name is Teresa. I'm a chapter representative for the IOIC, the International Indigenous Youth Council, the Rocky Mountain chapter. I am an enrolled member in the Lakota Ojibwe tribe. I am also Oglala Lakota, Santee Dakota, and Northern Cheyenne. Meek was supposed to be on here as well.
Perfect. Michael, would you like to introduce yourself? Okay, are you there? Can you hear me? We'll find out.
Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yay, okay. My name is Micaela Ironshell Dominguez. I apologize, I'm having some technical difficulties, which is great. You know, we all love this Zoom life these days, or live studio days, I should say. Anyway, I am one of the board members as well as adult mentors for the International Indigenous Youth Council. And I am also a co-founder of Women from the Mountain and also co-founder of People's Action Collective. That's me.
Perfect. Thank you guys so much for being here today. I believe that I'm just going to jump into our first question. Teresa, I'm going to ask you this first, and then Micaela, you can respond afterwards, okay? Does that work for everyone? Perfect. So the first question is, what has your experience been in organizing around police violence overall, and how has your organizing changed recently in the light of protests since George Floyd's murder, if at all?
So actually, I've been in a living situation where I'm not able to leave my house because of COVID. So I'm going to give this question to Meek because she's done a lot of wonderful things. Meek?
No problem. So I want to first say that for centuries, my people, Native Americans, have been experiencing police violence. And today we are about 2.5 times as likely to experience violent crimes and at least 2 times more likely to experience rape or sexual assault crimes compared to all their races. So when it comes to any type of protest or rally, I feel that I have a target on my back and they are just ready to snatch me up at any time. But that doesn't continue to fight for what I believe in. I feel that anti-police organizing is a very triggering experience, and police are especially violent and racist. They are an especially violent and racist part of an already violent and oppressed system, and it's because the majority of people, both Republican and Democrat, issues of police violence. And before the George Floyd murder, I was organizing a lot around environmental justice. A murdered Indigenous woman, but since it's protest almost every weekend involving a few things on here in Denver, and it all started the next day after the George Floyd. There was a shooting in the crowd at our Capitol when we were standing in solidarity with George Floyd, and for about 4 straight days, the peaceful protesters experienced nothing but extreme and brutal violence from the Denver Police Department along with our Denver sheriffs. I was shot along with my comrades, rubber bullets, and massive amounts of tear gas, and not to mention the trauma I now experience due to flash grenades being thrown and exploding next to us every few seconds. So after that, things seemed to calm down, but the protest continued. A huge protest that continues still to this day is getting justice for the murderer of our young brother killed by Aurora Police last August, and his name is Elijah McClain. And then that has led to many other protests put on by family members of those killed by Denver and Aurora police. On top of our protests and rallies about defunding and abolishing the police. So really that's pushed me to just help start a small collective with a few other like-minded people like myself to help give back to the community. And that's by providing frontline direct action trainings, medic trainings, and transformative art trainings, such as like doing screen printing, maybe teaching those how to use spray paint properly so that they can make, signs to go out when they do protest or when they rally. And that's all for, that way our community could be ready for what's next. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you so much for that insight. I think everything that you've been through it's really good to talk about. So thank you. The second question, Teresa, you'll have the opportunity to answer this first. Beyond police brutality, where is racial injustice and systemic racism seen in everyday life, especially for youth people of color?
I would definitely say racial injustice and systematic racism thrives in schools and with our education system. It's how our history has been taught. It's how some people think that we don't exist, that we're not here anymore. And it's those lies and that lack of information that really dehumanizes us. And so people think that slavery was a long time ago, when in reality it really wasn't. And they think that racism went away when the Emancipation Proclamation came, but it didn't. People don't even know about the residential schools that actually today is Orange Shirt Day. That's why I'm wearing an orange shirt. Talking about the 150,000 First Nations children being taken from their home and stripped of their culture and put in these residential schools. And that trauma still lives with us today. It's in the schools, it's implemented in every system, like the healthcare system, the housings, applying for jobs, the for-profit prisons, the business. This entire capitalistic society is meant to oppress, and that's because of the failure of our education system.
Beautiful. Thank you, Teresa. I mean, truthfully, I just want to same basically everywhere, from the unequal access to quality education and even access to healthcare and equal access to economic opportunities, the lack of generational wealth possessed by BIPOC communities, to the lack of access to quality food. So even the location of our communities is generally in high polluted areas with lots of industry, which leads to higher rates of cancer and other diseases caused by environmental factors, right? So it goes far beyond just racist interactions to the racist structure of our economic system.
Perfect. Thank you guys so much for answering that question. It provides a lot of really good insight. The next question that we would like to discuss is, what has been the biggest roadblock for you in trying to end systemic racism and the institutions that allow police officers to murder and assault Black, Indigenous, and people of color communities without accountability?
Honestly, the biggest roadblock for me personally, it has been not being able to be out in the streets with my community. I have been personally doing things online, different things online, like educating people, giving people resources on how to educate themselves. But yeah, that would definitely be my biggest roadblock, is not being able to be out there with my community, because I feel like community is exactly what we need in this time. This is how we're going to create change, is with our communities.
Well, thank you, Teresa. For me, I would say, to borrow from MLK, the white moderate is the biggest obstacle to change the system of racist policing. White people who say to wait for change, that nothing happens quickly in our system, that our methods are too extreme. White people whose only response systemic injustice is to tell us to vote. And we always have racists and those who hate, we will always have racists and those who hate us and wish to hold us back, but they will always be the minority. It's the moderate white masses who refuse to take urgent action, and instead of sit back in comfort and say that in a few years they will figure out how to get otherwise the system we live under to stop oppressing us. The system is designed to profit off our oppression, and if your only answer to the systemic issues of racism that exists under both parties is to vote, then you are likely a part of this problem. White moderates need to start looking towards things that have considered radical or revolutionary for the solutions to this issue. We need white people to stop thinking that the middle ground is always best and understand that the middle ground is what is keeping us oppressed.
Yeah, I think that is very true. Thank you for bringing up that point. What would you like to see non-Black, Indigenous, and people of color communities doing in order to support BLM and the fight for racial justice in our country?
I would think first steps would be to educate themselves, really sit down and dig deep into not only what's going on, but the history of this country, because and see how history is repeating itself. They say that they don't want history to repeat itself, so they learn history, but that you can't do that if the entire history isn't taught. I would also say speak up against your white counterpart that disagrees with Black Lives Matter. Also use that white privilege, because that is a special privilege that you hold with the color of your skin. Whether you realize it or not, that is something that you hold and has been the case since colonizers came over. That's just how it's been. And you need to use that in order to protect your Black and Indigenous communities. If you've seen the moms, the white moms that made their bodies a shield for the Black and Indigenous communities in Minneapolis, and the police, they didn't do anything. So that's like one way you can help if you can be out there. But yeah, I would just say, educating yourselves, speaking up, because staying silent is oppression as well.
Yeah. Thank you, Teresa. You're so right. Education. Please educate yourself. I would say I would like to see white communities looking into how they can give reparations to the BIPOC communities. And I would like for these white communities to come to us and ask what we need, instead of insisting that they know will help us the most. What white people need to understand is that we know our communities, we know how to help them, and all we need is the resources to do so. Find grassroots organizations that actually are embedded in the communities that they serve. And in general, I'd like to see the white communities actually engaging in our communities, not thinking that by voting or showing up to one protest that they have done their duty for that year. And if anything's going to change, white people need to see that this is a lifelong struggle for equality, just as it is for us. And that goes along, I can't stress enough, Teresa, with you saying that, when you talk about education, because a lot of the times they're looking for us to educate them, right? They're looking for us to send them resources. They're looking for us to give them all of our history, in an email, which is absolutely absurd. And so we just really need our white communities to really listen to what we have to say. So, yeah.
Perfect. Our last question to kind of wrap things up is, what specific policies and actions would you like to see be enacted on both the local and federal level in order to aid the fight against racial injustice? And to what extent can policy and electoral politics combat systemic racial injustice?
I'm going to be very honest. And this is just my opinion, I haven't really looked into the policies regarding this, but because that's always been abolish the police for me. And this is just speaking on personal experience. Every encounter that I've had has been violent. They've created problems. It wasn't helpful. They weren't there to serve and protect. They don't serve and protect anyone that's darker than a certain skin color. And that's just the reality of things. I mean, I've had family members that have been shot by the police. I've had family members that have been wrongfully arrested. And so when I say abolish the police, people ask me, well, who's going to protect us? And the reality of things is they've never protected us. they've always been somebody that's against us. And so I would say our communities, we need to start investing in our communities. And that could be investing in mental health counseling or substance abuse treatment, job training, free education as well, and also that reconnection to community and the ones that are around us, because we really need that in this time. We also need to get out of the individualistic mindset that has plagued this country.
I would say in general, from a native's perspective, this entire system has been set up to steal our land and remove us from our identity, from existence. I've had a hard time supporting most reforms. First of all, in order to change our position in society, we need reparations for what was stolen from us, whether it be land, life, or labor. And furthermore, we need to radically rethink our economic system towards something which values community and cooperation instead of competition and greed. And most racial justice reforms in our current system only lead to a more diverse version of oppression. And for example, having a Black mayor in charge of a police force that murders and oppresses Black and brown people. What I want to see is a more society for all, not, a society for all, and not a new face of my oppressor.
Perfect. Well, thank you both so much for attending this panel tonight and speaking. I think both of you have really valuable insights, and I'm so glad that we could share those tonight. Just to finish off, do you guys have any resources you'd like to share or anything you'd like to sign off with?
Yes, if you have not all, I would recommend you all to check out our youth that are at the Kumeyaay border right now. They're fighting the border wall that is going up on their territory. You can find the information on our page at IOAC Family, or you can go to their pages, which is Kumeyaay Defends the Wall. Defends the Wall, is that right, Teresa? Or is it Kumeyaay Against the Wall?
Kumeyaay Defense Against the Wall.
Yeah, Kumeyaay Defense Against the Wall. So I would really really recommend you all to really look into that, see how you can help our current youth that are fighting that border wall right now. And yeah, continue to keep following us. If you have anything, Teresa, to add.
That's good. Yeah, that is what we're fighting for right now. That's our main focus right now. Thank you so much for having us.
Of course. Thank you guys so much. I believe we are going to transition into a presentation by Student Voice, Student Vote.
Hi, my name is Tandi Glick, and I'm on the leadership board for Student Voice, Student Vote, a youth-led campaign seeking to expand the voting age in school board elections, empowering 16 and 17-year-olds to have a say in who makes decisions about our schools and our education. As organizations like March for Our Lives demonstrate, young people have a voice. Voting is one of the most essential means of expressing that voice, and that's something that's particularly key on issues that directly impact youth, as police violence does. As a high school student, I'm deeply affected by decisions made about schools. Discussions about curriculums, in-school emotional supports, or student safety aren't abstract. They're things that affect my day-to-day experience. We students have one of the biggest stakes in educational issues, and leaving us out of the decision-making process at the classroom, school, and district levels results in choices that don't truly reflect or meet student needs. As students, we have the best understanding of what we need in our schools. We need to be able to elect district leaders who understand and address those needs, and we need the power to hold our school board members accountable for the ways their decisions impact us. Electoral power can't be underestimated. Voting rights are essential, not just to youth and other disenfranchised groups, but to our democracy as a whole. Unfortunately, Colorado is currently being faced with a bill that seeks to limit voting rights. Amendment 76, which will appear on ballots this November, would shift language in our state constitution, which currently reads that every U.S. citizen 18 years or older has the right to vote, to instead state that only U.S. citizens 18 or older can vote. This seemingly small linguistic change would actually disenfranchise nearly 25,000 young people, those who are currently able to vote in primary elections as 17-year-olds, if they will be 18 by the corresponding general election. Any step down the slippery slope of limiting suffrage should be seen as a threat to our democracy. We need to protect the voting rights of young people and the voices of young people. Doing that right now means voting no on Amendment 76. It also means ensuring that students' voices are heard on issues like police violence, particularly when that violence is perpetuated in schools. My colleague, Alessandra Chever, is going to speak a little bit more on the ways that we as an organization and as students have been impacted by and attempted to work with our district to combat this issue.
Hi everyone, I'm Alessandra Chavira. I'm a co-chair for Student Voice, Student Vote. In my 18 years of living, I've been in school for 13 years. Year by year, I'd learn about the power of my voice. And the more I learned, the more I realized my voice was tokenized. Student voices are often amplified when they fit an adult's agenda and hushed when we ask to be at the decision-making table. This became evident to me the year my peers and I asked the district to end their contract with Denver's police department. The same police department that killed my friend from school. Anthony Ezequiel Solano Vasquez. He was only 17 when he fled and became a target to trained police. He was only 17 when those police bullets tore into his back. He was only 17 when his life was stripped before him and covered up as a suicide. The months following his death, I watched my homies, the homies that Tony and I loved, fall victim to hard drug use, depression, and in some circumstances, suicide. It's heartbreaking to say Anthony's story wasn't an isolated incident. A few months later, in the same community, 16-year-old Alexis Mendez Perez was killed by an officer from the same police department as Tony's killers. To this day, neither Anthony or Alexis have received justice for their deaths. Police presence in our schools and communities are not only a reminder of the trauma they bring in our hoods, but serve as a symbol of our city and school districts' budgeting decisions to fund the policing of our people rather than invest in our healing. Many of our district's board members looked the other way when we expressed that police in our schools were detrimental to our learning environment. My peers and I were tired of performative safety. We called for the eradication of SROs. Months worth of meetings and research was not enough for a simple ask, to reach a simple ask, which was to end the police and DPS contract. It took a national movement for our school board to end their contract with the police. It took a national movement for our voices to be validated. It took a national movement for them to reflect our values. It shouldn't be this hard for students, the largest stakeholders in the education system, to be heard in what impacts their education. Whether it's about feeling unsafe in their schools, wanting a more inclusive curriculum, or change in school lunch, student representation shouldn't be a matter of picking and choosing. I believe in the power of democracy and believe that voting for school board officials is a right 16 and 17-year-olds should have had a while ago in order to have true representation. And this is why I support this movement, and this is why I support Student Voice, Student Vote. Thank you, and long live Toker.
Hi, so sorry for the technical difficulties. Ashira, can you hear me?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, only barely. Do you have your camera?
Can you see me?
You can. Not yet, but we can start the question. Oh, yay! Woohoo! Okay, wonderful. All right. Hi, how are you doing today?
I'm good, how are you?
I'm good. Do you want to just really quickly say your name and like your role just in general?
Well, hi everyone, I'm Ashira. I'm from Denver, Colorado. I attend the SST. I am a senior, and I am an activist for Black Lives Matter.
Okay, great. So we're just gonna jump into these questions. So I know Shira personally. She's an amazing, amazing person. She's been protesting all summer. She's gone to Washington, D.C. You've probably seen her on the cover of the Denver Post. She's an amazing activist. So is Shira. I was just wondering, how have you changed over the course of this summer protesting, and how have your priorities and aspirations for the future changed?
I would say definitely changed about just our community and just about everyday life and just taking things for granted, honestly. And if anything, now I'm stronger, definitely a work in progress, and still passionate overall.
Great. Okay, so you've been to a lot of protests all around the nation. Are there any protests that specifically stand out to you? And if yes, why?
Well, I've attended so many protests. I would say four definitely have stood out to me. So I've protested in Denver, Aurora, and Washington, D.C. So I have four key dates. I would say May 30th was my second day of protesting in Denver, Colorado at the Capitol. And unfortunately, tear gas was thrown, and I unfortunately got hit with that. So it was definitely eye-opening for me just to see how the police react and how they provoke protesters when we're not even doing anything. Um, June 1st, I marched with the chief of police, and that was definitely a different experience for me. July 19th, I attended a pro-police rally, not to be in the rally, but to stop the the celebration of police, which is completely inappropriate. And during that rally, my mother and I, we were called racial slurs. We were told that we were uneducated. And later on during that day, the police had used pepper spray on protesters and escorted the pro-police rally supporters out while they targeted individuals such as my mom. And that was very unfortunate with pepper spray. July 25th, that is when I was protesting in Aurora, Colorado, and that is when the Jeep tried to run protesters over. And till this day, it is pretty traumatizing because shots were also fired, and nothing has happened to um, I would say just for justice for us, everyone that was on the highway, and to the Jeep driver that was just pulled over by police, not arrested. Nothing was taking place to address what happened, which is ridiculous. And definitely when I attended the march in Washington, D.C., it was called Get Your Knee Off of Our Necks, I believe. Don't quote me on that, but yeah, that was definitely eye-opening, and I will never forget that moment.
Yeah, and I think that's so important, just like seeing that contrast between how our law enforcement interacts with peaceful protesters and what that really means. So it's amazing that you've had that experience so young in your life, and like now you can take that momentum and go into the future and do amazing things. So the next question I had was, have you ever had any negative experiences with the police or law enforcement, either protesting or in general? And if you're comfortable, would you share? And I know you touched on a few, but if you want to expand a little more, that would be great.
Yeah, I could definitely expand. I've seen protesters get arrested just for minding their own business. Last week, I attended a protest for PSL to drop the charges of the the leaders that are currently facing felonies for the incident that happened in Aurora, Colorado, for the Jeep that tried to basically kill protesters. I've seen people hit with rubber bullets in like their eyes, and people hit with tear gas, pepper spray, pepper balls, and definitely at the Elijah McClain violin vigil, it was violent and peaceful, which was crazy to me. How one side there's violinists, playing beautiful music to recognize the life Elijah had, and then the other side you have police hurting people just for using their voices. So that was definitely it was really sad. And also, my mother and I went to a middle school, or I believe middle school or high school, and this is where the houseless sweeps were taking place, and the police were not allowing us to help our neighbors. So that definitely was very upsetting to me.
Yeah, and it's like that Elijah McClain memorial protest, I think, is just such an interesting and like telling example. I was there passing out snacks to the peaceful protesters, and just watching that like contrast of like peace and just like celebration of life descending into chaos. Like, it was just so telling of not only like the reaction on that spectrum and like on that end, but just like as youth, like it's harrowing to see. So the next question I have is, what was the experience of organizing for a school like for a march versus attending a march, and what stuck out to you about being particularly difficult? And for reference, Ashira and I co-organized a Black Lives Matter march for our school network, which garnered about 300 participants and enacted changes in our school's history curriculums and finals, and also brought to the attention of our administration our demands in the Black Lives Matter movement. So do you have any extra thoughts, difficulties, ideas?
I would say definitely it is different. Organizing and attending are completely different things, just because you want everything to go correctly. Because we had a whole agenda. We met up together to make sure we had speakers, we had snacks, water, we had the route planned out. But when you're attending a protest, you're like, hey, we're going with the flow. If we want to go left, we'll go left. Like, it is what it is. Definitely different. I would say it was definitely life-changing, though, because that was my first time like leading a protest with other leaders in our school, like you, Natalie. And I definitely enjoyed it, though. And I like the support that we had from our community, our teachers, our parents. It was definitely really good. We couldn't have done it without our community, period.
Yeah, it was a great experience, and anyone who's watching out there who's thinking about doing something along these lines, you'll never know if you don't try. And I know I'm personally happy to help if you ever need anything. So final question, just really quickly, like, what are your demands as a BLM activist, and how do you find time for yourself and have time to like care for yourself and relax?
I would say like a couple demands is just straight up, police need to get rid of their riot gear, because it is very provoking to anyone that is in the crowd, period. Protester or non-protester, it's very provoking. And just to get rid of anything you would use in a war. Like, get rid of pepper balls, tear gas, rubber bullets. Straight up, like, just get rid of it. It's unnecessary whatsoever. And this is really broad, but just to get rid of guns, in my opinion, just when it's in the hands of an irresponsible person, things like this happen. So yeah. And then how do I ask that question again real quick about myself?
How do you find time for yourself? Like, how do you like decompress and like come back to reality, because I know organizing and protesting is really, really draining, and can be really harrowing.
Definitely. I stay like reading my Bible. I pray. I definitely spend time with my mom. We had like a girls' night out tonight. Got our nails did, and just to do a lot of self-reflecting. Honestly, maybe I personally don't like journaling, but I've gone into it just because. Stay off of social media. I'm just gonna say that that's toxic, especially right now. But a lot of self-reflection and basically, yeah, that's all. I also work out and just take care of myself and acknowledge and be thankful for what I have right now.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Ashira. You are literally an icon and an inspiration. I'm so happy that you found the time to come and sit down with us today. I love you so much, and you are amazing. So that is ours. Bye. I love you. So now we are going to jump to Amanda for, yeah.